right, this is Trevor with Vibin Higher, and I'm being joined with Mimi from RadCast.org. How's it going, Mimi?
Hey, it's going good.
All
It's
right.
nice to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are, like I said, you're running RadCast.org, which is, now you can kind of elaborate on this, but like a citizens monitoring group, I guess you would say, right?
Yeah, it's a space for not only maps that have data from citizens from around the world with meters. Okay, they will all be uploading to the maps at some point, but Radcast is new, so we're working on the back end of that. Oh, I don't know if you could hear that beep. That's my Geiger counter.
Oh, okay,
Hear
wow.
that beep? Yeah, that's my Geiger counter, and it's telling me what my radiation is in my room right now. So I'll pull that down here in a minute.
Hopefully not high.
So we all have Geiger counters on those on the maps, and we upload the information to the maps and we present it. So the main map on that page, on the radcast.org page, is averages. And you look at that page and you click on a button on there, any of the dots, and it pulls up a bunch of different information about data about radiation.
Okay.
And there's a map below it which has all of the past data that we have so far from each individual site.
Okay.
And over time, you'll have more and more data from those sites. And then there's another map called Story Maps. And that's going to continue to grow, and we get to tell stories about different events that take place. For instance, Fukushima Daiichi and what happened on 3/11.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on a story map right now where we tell the story in sometimes text, sometimes pictures, and data. So it goes back and forth between photos and the maps and like this. So it becomes a very interesting story where you get to really see where things are at, what we're talking about, and put the whole thing together. The other piece of Radcast that is the part that I particularly like is we put out a Radcast report, like the weather report.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I do every night, kind of close to midnight. And I look at the United States in radiation terms, and I look at the weather, and we look at events that are happening in Japan. And we wait sometimes, like we are right now, for waves of radiation to come in when things are leaking hard over there. And that's what's happening right now. We're getting some waves coming in across the U.S. And then I pick states that I find interesting that I want you to know about. And I put them on the Radcast report. And there's a space on the map that says that. So every day we have a different Radcast report.
Okay.
The other piece of the Radcast is education. And we have documents on there. We'll have letters on there. We have all kinds of things that you can do in your community to teach other people who, your neighbor, about what you're learning about radiation, for instance. We have terminology. We have a science teacher who writes in, and he talks about the science of radiation in a way that's really interesting. We have a nurse who's also a nutritionist, and she writes about ways to help yourself with mitigating the effects of radiation. So it's a really big site.
Yeah, it's definitely, it seems pretty comprehensive.
Yeah.
So it seems that like the biggest, the most pressing issue right now is probably the Fukushima, the fallout coming from the radiation there, which was the earthquake in March of 2011 and the subsequent tsunami, right?
That's right. Yeah, it created quite a mess. Actually, it didn't. What did create the mess was the idea that nuclear power would be the way to go, and that we needed nuclear power to make nuclear weapons. And those two things are like identical twins. Mm-hmm. You can't talk about one without talking about the other, but mostly people don't talk about the bombs. I like to talk about the bombs. It's the reason that we created the first nuclear experiments was to create bombs. Mm-hmm. And subsequently we had Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the death of hundreds and hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people after that happened, plus the bomb tests that went down. All of this was generated from plutonium. And what we're experiencing right now was a fission product, the falling apart of a nuclear plant, the likes of which has never been seen before, and it led to 3 melt-throughs, not meltdowns, but melt-throughs, through the containment vessels that those were in, and into the ground, and down through the ground, which is where we all think they are now. And down underneath Fukushima Daiichi, buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4, you have sand, and then you have groundwater, and then you have ocean. So when we think about a melt-through, you have to think about the corium of 3 different buildings being in the ocean.
Okay. Yes, that was one of the questions that kept coming up is, do they know whether or not this radiation is basically seeping in directly into the ocean without any kind of filtration?
We're all pretty darn sure that that's exactly what's happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the number that's being floated is something like 300 tons a day.
That's a bogus number.
Okay.
The reason that I say it's a bogus number is to get that number, you have to know a couple of things. The first thing you have to know is that number was taken from the tanks. Originally, the story goes like this, and everything that TEPCO says is just a story.
Yeah.
It's the moment that they're telling a story in that very moment, because the next day that story will change. And it's because TEPCO does this with their information. They make stuff up as they go along, and that is a fact. So the story of the 300 tons of water leaking came about when they discovered that some of the tanks that they were flushing the radiated water into to hold it back from the ocean, those tanks were leaking. And the reason that those tanks were leaking was because TEPCO decided that they would just use a sheet of metal, whatever kind of metal that is that they're using for the tanks, like basically one sheet with no welds. Okay, this is holding water. I have to remind you of that. It's holding radiated water, really super hot stuff, and liquid. And they created a tank with no welds, but bolts. Well, if you think about bending metal and taking it to the other end so that it seals, you're going to want a weld in there. You're going to want many welds, and you're going to want, super solid whatever. Well, they don't have that. They got these, bolts. Well, the bolts started to break and crack, and water started to come out. So the story of the 300 tons is that the 300 tons is from the water from these tanks leaking into the ocean. But when they went back to the tanks to see how much water was leaking from the tanks, word got out that they never knew how much water was in the tanks in the first place. They knew how big the tanks were, but there were no gauges that told you how high up they filled each tank. So let's say one tank, I'm just making these numbers up, let's say one tank had a capacity of 100,000 gallons, okay? And it went down to, let's say, 50,000 gallons. Well, you don't know what it was filled up to in the first place because there was nothing telling any of the workers how much was in there. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this number 300 is a random number. The number actually began at 400. Then it changed to 300. Then it went to 600. This was in a matter of hours and days. Then, after 600, it floated back to 300. And it did a dance between 3 and 4. Then what we found out was the water is actually flowing down the hills behind Fukushima, going into the plants, as well as water seeping up from the groundwater, as well as tank water leaking out of the tanks, okay? Now, is there a gauge on all of that? Does somebody have a gauge telling you how much water outside from rain, from anything else is coming down the hill? Do they have a gauge that tells you how much hose water they're using from the ocean going back in? Nobody knows anything. So the 300 tons is a bogus number. We have no idea how much water is actually going into the ocean, radiated water. What we know is they're using ocean water to cool everything, and that water definitely seeps back out and goes back in the ocean. The tanks are leaking, and that goes into the ocean. The water that runs down from behind the plant goes through the radiated buildings, and that goes into the ocean. So I think I've made my point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were talking about how that number came from TEPCO, which kind of dovetails into this next thing, which was one of the topics that I kept hearing about, which is the secrecy bill that was recently passed or partially passed in Japan. And a lot of people think that might have be directly related to not wanting to get a lot of the information surrounding the whole situation at Fukushima out.
It is directly related to that. And what I noticed when they decided that they were going to create that law and instill that law, it was interesting to me because the information that was coming out from TEPCO anyway was all a lie. And for instance, we found out recently, very recently, I mean, we're almost at 3 years here. We're a couple months away from 3 years. Mm-hmm. We found out very recently, in the last few months, that they knew on day one that the cores of 1, 2, and 3 went through the containment on day one.
Oh, wow. They
made out for 2.5 years that they didn't think that had happened. But the numbers were saying otherwise. How could we have these numbers of radiation that were going out and not have that happen? So we started to get scientists speculating and people, us, speculating, how can this be? Well, they finally copped to it just a few months ago. And the reason that they had to cop to it was it wasn't making much sense once the FOIA documents came out, expressing how the NRC was told that the fuel pool in Building 4 had blown a wall and there was no water in there. And all of these things, piece by piece, started moving together, and TEPCO finally said, yeah, we knew on day one, within hours, within 3 or 4 hours, that the core melted through.
Wow.
Yeah, we just found that out.
That's pretty disturbing. And
right.
It kind of goes along the same lines of, and you might be able to speculate a little bit better on this, but I've seen and heard, and it might just be speculation, that government agencies here in the United States are kind of behind the scenes raising the safe level of radiation for different things. Is that true?
They did it. They started this pretty much right away. TEPCO started it. They changed their ratings on different things pretty much immediately, and it didn't take President Obama long to follow suit. Okay. And he ordered it through the EPA and the FDA. So our standards were, it's funny to say our standards were raised. Our standards were lowered by raising the acceptable amount of radiation that we can ingest.
So, and we can kind of assume that that's so that there won't be any kind of alarms going off for anybody like, hey, we're, a little bit above this level here that is formerly safe.
Yeah, and the difference in levels of what is quote-unquote okay for the government's people in the United States and Canada and Japan vary widely. It's a very interesting thing to look at. How do governments decide what is safe for their people? And the United States is seriously and severely lacking in that respect for care for the American people.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
So, let's see, and there seems to be some kind of Yakuza connection, or the Yakuza are involved somehow.
The Yakuza is the Japanese mafia, and the Yakuza have been involved in the nuclear industry in Japan from the beginning. Not the beginning of the Fukushima Daiichi event, but the beginning of nuclear power in Japan, I believe. I'm not sure when that began. It was decades ago. Mm-hmm. But that's what their mafia is into there. They specialize in nuclear for whatever reason. They make their money in nuclear where our goon squad makes their money from oil.
Yeah, okay.
So we do oil, they do nukes. We also do nukes here. Theirs is the equivalent to our oil moguls,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I'm on the West Coast as well. I'm down, Southern California. Is this something that that we should be worried about here? I'm not myself in any kind of position to move. I know a lot of people aren't, able to pick up and move or try to get away or go east. But I've heard you say that ultimately there's really no place to go.
Where are you going to go? It's one world. It's one planet. You step off, you're in space. We've got nowhere to go. when you kill the planet, you kill the planet. And yeah, you know, people are like, yeah, well, one day the planet will reinvent itself. Of course it will. You know, it's something. You know, stars do too. They explode, they become something else. Personally, I would like to know that, you know, the animals are going to make it, and the people are going to make it, and the children that aren't here are going to make it. But quite honestly, we've never seen anything like this before, ever, ever, ever. I mean, so when we hear scientists and doctors, which we're doing a lot of now, hearing this, I don't care where they're from. It doesn't matter to me. It could be, you know, anybody. And they say, oh yeah, well, things aren't so bad. Or people are really worried over nothing. Or you can eat the fish. We've only seen it in a fish, you know, cesium in one fish or cesium in a couple of fish. It doesn't mean anything, and the levels are so much lower now. This is the kind of crap that you hear anytime you read anything about Fukushima here in the U.S. You also hear it in Japan too. So how do they know that? How do they know that? How can you prove that everything is fine when we're dealing with radiation, ionizing radiation? It comes from nuclear plants. It comes from nuclear, you know, fission. It is made. It is a man-made thing that kills people. We know that low levels of radiation will kill you too, you know. Maybe not as quickly, maybe as quickly. Who knows? It depends on your genetic structure, you know. If you're weaker and you're around low levels of radiation all the time, it's going to get you over time, you know. If you're around high levels, it's going to get you too. So how can these people say, oh, you're just panicking? I'm not panicking, you know. I'm still growing my food in my garden. I still eat organic stuff. I'm also aware that testing my food, at least as basic, on a basic level as possible with my Geiger counter, makes me feel a little bit better, knowing if my food's hot or not. Geiger counters aren't the best method to test food, but it's something, you know. And these people come into our lives, into our TVs, into our homes, and they say, gee, Doris, everything's just going to be fine, you know. And I say, have you ever seen anything like this? We're only 3 years in. Last I heard, the thyroid disease on the West Coast among children has been raised, like, I don't know if it was 40%, 42%, and this was a while ago.
Wow.
This was like, the report came out like 6 months ago, and please don't quote me on the percentage. I can't remember exactly what that is, but you can find it on the big Google machine. If you look up thyroid disease in children, it's the Joe Mangano study, Chris Busby. There's a study out there about that. So, yeah, we need to be worried about this. To not be worried about this is to have your head in the sand. The question is, what do we do about it? Where can we go? Do we go anywhere? Do we change what we eat? Do we change how we play? Do we change the lives of our children? Do we change the lives of our animals? You know, what about those who have big farms? You know, what are they going to do? And these are really big questions because there's nowhere to go. Sure, you can go down to South America. You want to know what the radiation levels are in Brazil? I don't think you really want to know. Mm-hmm. I know what they are, and they're extremely high in parts of Brazil. Where are you going to go? We got nuke plants around the globe. We know that, you know, Chernobyl blew, 3 Mile Island blew, Fukushima Daiichi blew. What, it's going to stop there? These are in 3 different areas of the world. You know, we got Pennsylvania, we got Chernobyl in Russia, we got Fukushima in Japan, there's India, you name a country, and I don't know, man. I don't think Saudi Arabia has a nuclear power plant. Y'all can move to Saudi Arabia.
Think they've got their own issues over there as well.
You know what I mean? Like, where the hell are you going to go?
Yeah.
Eventually, the oceans make way to the oceans. And the plume in the oceans will generate, the fish migrate. So mitigation is where it's at. Trying to keep your body strong.
Yeah, and you guys speak to that on radcast.org. That was one of the things that I want to ask. As far as like preventative measures or things that we should be avoiding in our food, can you offer any advice along those?
Yeah, man, don't eat the fish. You know, and don't listen to anybody. And I'll say this emphatically: do not eat anything from the Pacific Ocean.
Really?
And remember that the Pacific Ocean is not just what comes in on our shore. We've got all of the different countries that sell food to the United States. You know, we have made in Korea. We have made in Japan. Grown here, grown there. All of that has been highly radiated. We still have stuff that's radiated in Europe from Chernobyl. You know, they got a lot of food that's still radiated over there, and they sell that to the U.S. So, the first thing is stop eating the fish for sure, and do not eat seaweed from the Pacific. Basically, nothing from the Pacific. And you'll hear lots of different, you know, people will call me a fanatic, I'm sure, for saying that. And hey, man, it's up to you. It's your life and your body. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you're going to ask me what you should do, that's what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah,
you know?
That seems to be the biggest question that I've got is you know, what should we be avoiding? And I think seafood was probably the obvious one. Is there anything that we can do? I noticed on RadCast that there was maybe herbs or things that we could do to kind of boost our immune system.
There are so many that we're compiling a big list on RadCast. The list has begun, so it is there under nutrition, and we're going to be adding to that. But I like to make sure that it's not just, you know, everybody throwing out an herb, you know. We're trying to check and make sure this stuff is really, you know, that these are good cell builders. It's basically where we're going here. Good cell builders, good vitamins to take, and you have to know your sources now. It's not enough to just say I'm going to take this or I'm going to take that. If you're getting a capsule, for instance, of some herb, where was it grown? If it was grown near Russia, you don't want to be taking that. You know, if it was grown in Germany, you might not want to be taking that. It depends. Just due to radiation in our world. So we're trying to, the reason that things are slow isn't because we don't know what helps you. It's we need sources to give you. Rather than just say, do this, do this, do this, do this. Well, okay, where do I get it from where it's safe? And we still have time to get that. But that's the missing piece there too, you know?
Well, speaking about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's deep, man. This is a really deep, deep problem. It is so, there are so many levels when you think about people trying to destroy the planet, what that means, you know? The skies and the oceans, and what that means to humans and anything living. It's powerful. And that is what our government is complicit with, the Japanese government, and any other government. You know, Germany, as far as I know, is one of the only governments, if not the only government at this point, who is very busy taking down every single new plant they have as they can. And they've got a plan and they're doing it.
Well, speaking of government complicity, how about, have you heard about, I mean, I know that I saw actually on the RadCast Twitter account that the government is actually buying up most of, if not all of the radiation meters, the Geiger counters, I guess.
It's from one company, and I'm not going to talk about the name of the company, but I do know this as a fact, and it's not that they're buying out all of them, but they did buy out all that were there. Oh. So I went to talk to this company, and we cannot get meters until March because the government just bought them out. Not the company, but bought out the supply. And the word that I got was not only did they buy out the supply, but they had a plan to buy however many meters it is. I was trying to find out, but I haven't yet. I'm very curious how many meters did they actually get. The plan was with this company that they would buy meters later in the year. And the reason I think, it's purely speculative on my end, is that all of the so-called forecasters for when radiation was going to really get to us is later in 2014. So I don't know why the government bought the meters in the first place, though I would also speculate that it's one of two reasons. They need to pass them out to people in the government to use, just smaller meters. The EPA has the big ones that they also don't use or use infrequently, or when they do use them, we never know if the information they're giving us is correct or not. So they bought all these meters early. And what we know, those of us who track radiation all the time, is that we're seeing big waves coming in right now. Building 2 is leaking. There's a hole in the containment vessel. And so I think it's in the containment vessel, not the old pool. And anyway, Building 2 is leaking currently, and we're getting radiation from that right now. And when the government goes to do that, I mean, don't you just sit back and say, wow, you did what? Why did you do it?
Yeah.
Is your purpose because you need them? Is your purpose because you don't want us to have them? Are you going to go to other companies? There aren't that many who make good meters. Are you going to go to the other companies and try to get their supply? Because again, is it because you need them and you're going to use them? And if you need them and you're going to use them, why aren't you telling us that? You know?
Yeah.
And if you're just buying them out to buy them out, then you don't want us to have them. So again, when the government doesn't tell us what they're doing, we have no idea but to sit here and speculate. And that's what I'm doing with you right now.
No, I think it's good to, at least get the word out there. Have you heard anything about the potassium iodide supply also being kind of bought up?
Well, I don't know how factual that is. I have heard that, and I don't know how factual it is. It could be. What I do know, more importantly, is that when 3/11 happened, did anyone come to you, to your house, to say, hey, you need to take these pills because it's going to protect your thyroid? Did that happen for you, Trevor?
No way.
Me either, man. I have yet to meet one person on the West Coast who had the government say anything at that time, which is when it was supposed to happen, that we needed to take that. And for me, that was the most heinous and the most negligent moment that their inaction on that was, for me, the potential murder of people on the West Coast. All they had to do was say, you know what, we got a big problem here. Well, we figured that out. West Coasters and probably people on the next level back, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and keep on going. Y'all should just take these right now. This would be the time to do that. Because we're going to have iodine 131 coming down. And that's going to land in your thyroid. And they didn't do that. So that's what I do know. And for me, again, the level of willful negligence in that non-maneuver is the thing that I cannot let go of.
And that's obviously something that, being that we are almost 3 years removed, if you were to start getting on that potassium iodide, would that just kind of be fruitless?
No. It would, in fact, make you sick.
Really?
Yeah, no. So people who are listening to this, by all means, if you can go get that at your drugstore, go get it. Keep it in your bathroom, But do not take it. It will make you sick.
Okay.
It can hurt you really badly and it can kill you.
Oh, okay.
But you can only take this at a very certain time. And that is when we're getting, this particular influx of isotope coming down. So, no, don't take it. But get it.
Okay, so what do you see as being the pressing issues as far as maybe what we as citizenry can start to do, and maybe getting involved with RadCast or getting involved with supporting this movement in the year 2014?
I think the best thing that you can do for yourselves, forget about RadCast, the best thing you can do for yourselves is get a meter. First of all, get a meter because the government maybe doesn't want you to have them. Maybe they don't care. Maybe, what I know is they know they need them. I know you need them. And when you have one and everything goes down, we no longer have access to any communication because something happens, whatever that big thing is, if that ever should occur. you will have a meter, and it will be your guide to where you are safe. You know, a gun, whatever. You know, you can't eat your gun. So you get a meter, and it's going to tell you what food is really toxic and what food isn't. And when I say toxic, I'm talking about radioactive isotopes. You know, you're not going to know which ones they are, but you're going to know if it's hot. So the very first thing is to get a meter. And if you want help with the process, you can come into RadCast and we'll help you along with that. We have the meters that we like, that we recommend, and we have a list of crappy meters as well. You know, I should actually just call them that. Here's the crappy ones. It's something, but
it's probably better than nothing, right?
It probably. I don't know. I don't really know if that's true. I feel like it's like buying a lemon for a car. You know, I can't in my heart recommend a crappy meter. I just can't. What I can do is say, everybody knows somebody. You know, so get a whole bunch of somebodies so that you can get $550 together and share a meter. You know, do it with people you like. So if, you know, some weird thing happened and you had to hang out, you'd all like each other and you can share the meter, you know?
So is that...
I share my meter. I didn't buy my meter myself. In fact, the community of Portland bought the meter that I use. And I told them that I will get them rad counts. And that's what I do. We created RadCast, you know? And I encourage people, you don't all have to have one meter. Share it. Buy it together. But get a meter. Know the food you eat. Buy organic food, buy it locally. Because if you know what the radiation counts are in your neighborhood, and you're buying, you know, your neighbor's food or sharing food from your neighbor's garden, you're going to know what the rads are. You know? If it's growing in, I don't know, in Colorado, it's going to have a lot more rads in it than it is over here. Because I know that. Because I know what the radiation readings are. You know? So... yeah, what can you do, man? Get a meter, really. That's all it's the biggest thing I have to say about it. Eat well, learn about ways to improve your immune system, because that will help you in the long run. Ionizing radiation, combating that, well, you know, it's a big battle. Definitely a big battle that we're up against. You have the ability to test the rain and know when you really should not let that stuff hit you. And it's not all the time right now. You know, some days are bad and some days are fine. I don't play in the rain when I know it's hot. But I know it's hot and the government's not going to tell you. So I can't impress upon this enough. I mean, that is the first move in protecting yourself.
Being able to detect it yourself.
Yep. Not depending on anybody but you. Not depending on RadCast, not depending on your mom, you know? Like you will know. And then you can help your mom out.
And people can find, you said people can find all the information on maybe getting their own meter on radcast.org.
Oh yeah, just go to meters. We have a meter section there, and we talk about meters, different kinds of meters. There's a page on, if you want help from us getting a meter, there's a page for that too, you know. I'm not here to push those as far as from us. I don't care how you get one.
Yeah.
If you want the help, we offer it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything that you know you would kind of like to get out there? Maybe some events coming up in the future, or?
No. I do want to say though that where you are, this very cool thing happened that I heard about, and there's not a whole lot of cool things that are happening right now. And there's a restaurant down there called Seagrass. And I heard about it, and I was so excited because I said when I was starting RadCast, at some point, there's going to be some restaurant that stops selling fish from the Pacific. And when they do that, I am going to list them on RadCast as the coolest restaurant to go and support. Yeah. And that restaurant happened. And it's called, I think it's Seagrass. It's on our website. And it's in Santa Barbara. And I called the chef, who was also the owner, and spoke to the chef and to the chef's son. And I thanked them for being so caring for the people who come in and eat the food that they make. And this is what we're getting to. We're getting to a place where we need to really wake up into a higher consciousness about how things are going to be. That's what radical consciousness is about, with a capital R-A-D. It's about radiation consciousness. And how can we help each other out? Well, we can start with what we eat and how we feed each other and how we talk to each other about what's going on, and not arguing the point, you know. We know that, again, low levels of radiation are terrible for you. They can kill you. So can, you know, higher levels of ionizing radiation. It's all bad. So we talk about it. And when people try to tell us that we're crazy, hey man, choose your fights, you know. So just, you know, try to be well, be good, grow your own food if you can, share it with your neighbors, get a meter and test it and know what's going on. That's really, you know, where things are at.
Hopefully seagrass is the first of many.
I sure hope so, man. It isn't changing in Portland. That's where I am, you know.
And you guys, I noticed that you guys also do have links on the website for certain things that you know that they test their items. I know that one of them was a guy who sells seaweed. Is that correct?
Yeah, the seaweed man.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. I ask everybody to support him. His seaweed is totally checked. He's like the 4th generation in a family of seaweed sellers from the coast of Maine. And there's a super cool family, and they get all of their seaweed harvests checked at the university there for radiation, specifically for radiation. And by the way, if you hear people say that the food is tested, any kind of food, oh yeah, we test it, you need to ask them what they test it for. Because I can guarantee you, most, 99.9% of those people are not testing for radiation. Those people are testing for chemicals. They're testing for heavy metals. But they're not testing for radiation. So call them out on it, man. Question them. And ask them to find a lab to test.
I mean, I know I unfortunately, I have pretty much a weekly thing that I do with friends. It's going to a local seafood restaurant here, and I've mentioned it, I've brought it up, and actually at more than a couple places, and I think the default response is just that no, that's not really a problem. It's the studies say that.
Do you know what happens to your sperm?
What's that?
When you eat particles of, whether it's cesium or plutonium or strontium or tritium.
Well, I can't imagine it's good.
No, it isn't good. It alters things. It alters DNA. And so when reproduction occurs, if you have been affected, and you don't know if you've been affected, either the woman can't keep her pregnancy, the fetus won't be strong enough, or you can birth babies with many abnormalities. And it's because these particles affect your DNA. So we're talking generations down the line here, And when you eat that, you have to say to yourself, what am I eating? How's this going to affect me later? I'm a young person. Am I going to want to have a kid? Do I want to bring a kid into the world? And if I do, what did I just do to my body? And what am I going to be making when I make that child? And to get a better idea about that, just look at studies in Chernobyl. Look up generations and abnormalities in babies from Chernobyl. You'll see it all there. It's horrible.
Well, it's amazing to me, that this isn't an issue that's bigger or more known.
Well, you got a lot of people trying to, suppress it, right? You got the Japanese government trying to suppress it. The United States government completely suppresses it. You have scientists who work for the government who pretend that they're not working for the government, completely suppressing it actively, telling you everything's fine. You have people like Greenpeace putting out messages now that everything's fine. It's again, back to, it's deep. The levels that we see in trying to make us believe that fish that you just ate is okay, is deep, and nobody here is on your side, at all. These people do not care about you. And they might really believe what they're saying, you know? But the question that you have to keep asking yourself is, how do I know if I just ate a particle? And I don't. And would I have eaten it if I knew that it had, I don't know, some form of worm in it that was going to get me sick? Would I eat it? Well, probably not, right? So you kind of don't do that. You don't eat raw chicken. And I'm not saying that raw sushi is a dangerous thing in and of itself at all. I love sushi, you know. What I'm saying is you don't know if there's a particle in it. Mm-hmm. So why are you going to eat it when you know what it can do to you?
Yeah, I swore off seafood about halfway through this interview.
I mean, there's other things to do, right? You can get a new career in building solar, you know? I mean, study up on wind, do something good. Not you, I mean, but like people who work in those fields. Like, I'm sorry, your field is about to go away. You know, if you're a fish farmer, man, your career's toast. It's just a matter of a very short time, before the word actually gets out.
All right, Mimi. Well, geez, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface and still gotten a lot more information than I even thought was available. I definitely want to thank you for the interview, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, I'm here, and thank you for letting your peeps know what's going on. And again, it's deep. The levels are big. You're going to get a lot of information from a lot of people who are super dramatic about this stuff. And man, the drama's already in the story. You don't need added drama to it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's all about radiation. And so try to keep a cool head. Try not to spread rumors, you guys. Try to figure out the truth from the non-truth. If you ever need help with that, you can write to me at RadCast. I have a whole team of people who I ask questions of. Shit, I don't know it all at all. I go to people I trust and I talk to them and say, hey man, I'm hearing this. Is this true or not? And they tell me, and then I pass it back to you. Mm-hmm. So don't believe everything you hear, not just from these whacked out scientists, who are telling us everything's fine, but also from the other end, man. It's a spectrum. You got people on both ends of it, and you got people towing the middle line. You got people towing the far right, and you got people towing the far left. And what I try to tow is the truth about it, just the reality. And it's worse than the middle folks say it is. It's certainly worse than the righties say it is, And sometimes it's not as crazy as the far, far, far left says it is either. It's different than that. It's bad for sure. We're in for a heavy ride. Especially as the new generations are born and they're not here yet. And that's where it's going to get ugly.
It's definitely disturbing. Well, obviously people can reach you at the website radcast.org, and you've got the official Twitter, which is at radcastreport. Is there anything else, any other websites or any social media that you wanted to get out there for everybody?
No, the places that I usually recommend are all on RadCast under links.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks again, Mimi, and hopefully we'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, cool.